Try again. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the September 7th Planning Commission hearing. I will now call the hearing to order. It is 1:02 p.m. Mrs. Esparza, can we please have a roll call?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take roll call. Chair Bonderson.
Here.
Vice Chair Balke.
Here.
Commissioner Boss.
Here.
Commissioner DeLuccio. Here. Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Wardlow.
Here.
And Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Perfect. We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will begin with item number 2, preliminary matters. Let's begin with requests of continuances, withdrawals, postponements of X agenda items. Do we have any here today?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We have none.
Thank you, Ms. DeBusk. And do we have any announcements and appeals?
Yes, I did want to make a few announcements. One is that we have had an appeal. This will actually be the first appeal from Single Family Design Board that's coming to the Planning Commission rather than the City Council. So that is for a project at, sorry, I lost my notes, at 1830 Overlook, tentatively scheduled for October 5th. And then I also wanted to announce that the Community Development Director has issued an emergency coastal development permit for hillside stabilization at 3405 Sea Ledge Lane and 3357 Cliff Drive. Notice was provided to neighbors. We received no public comment on it. It was too late to include in this week's packet, so it will be in your packet for next week. And just, if you're not aware, with an emergency coastal development permit, the applicant is required to come to the Planning Commission for a formal coastal development permit within a year to either get the work formally approved, removed, modified, et cetera. So that will be coming to the Planning Commission at some point. And then finally, I wanted to announce that the Fall Advisory Board recruitment will open tomorrow. So if anyone's interested in applying for any city advisory boards, including the Planning Commission, now is the time to get in your application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busk.
Bonderson?
Yes,
Sorry.
another announcement?
No announcement. These were left in the back. They're a pair of sunglasses. If anyone has left their sunglasses, they can be claimed. I'll give them to Mr. Rada. Here's some speaker slips.
Ms.
Thank
Ostringer,
you.
it's a perfect time to make announcements. It fits perfectly into the agenda. Thank you very much. All right, we'll be moving on to item C, or 2C, which is review, consideration, and action on the following draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. And we will begin with the minutes first for August 10, 2023. I'll open this back up to my commissioners, my fellow commissioners. First, are there any planner commissioner comments on the August 10th minutes? I see none. Any public speaker comments for the minutes, Ms. Esparza?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We have none.
All right. Do we have a motion for the August 10 minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Very good, thank you. And is there any discussion on the motion? I see nothing, so I will move forward. We have a motion from Commissioner DeLuccio, a second from Commissioner Wiscombe. Mrs. Esparza, can we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take the roll call vote. Commissioner Boss.
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge.
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Vice Chair Balke.
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now move on quickly to the August 17 Planning Commissioner minutes. Are there any planning commissioners who may have comments on the
I do.
minutes? Yes, please, go ahead, Commissioner DeLuccio, please.
Yeah, I have a comment, actually. I don't know if this is the right time to say it, but my motion was to continue indefinitely so the project can return to a full commission. That was the hotel project. So my concern is that you have it agendized for, I think, September 21st, 710 State Street, and I don't think we'll have a full commission that day. I think Vice Chair Bucky is on vacation. And I know that it also has a streamlining, doesn't it have an action required by October 12th?
Yes, Commissioner DeLuccio, you're absolutely correct. That item is tentatively scheduled for your agenda on a date when we know not all of the commissioners will be present. Unfortunately, we don't have an agenda with all of the commissioners present in advance of the project hitting its Permit Streamlining Act deadline. And so, and to add to that, the applicant did request to get on the first available agenda regardless of having a full commission, and for that reason, we've scheduled it for that date.
And I gather they're not going to waive their rights.
Correct, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Says. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. On that, that's my only comment. Otherwise, I'm fine with the minutes, the way they're written.
Thank you so much, and it's important, I think, for us to all know the details on what, what goes into that decision to agendize. So thank you very much. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to Mrs. Esparza. Do we have any public speaker
Okay,
comments?
I'll move the minutes.
One moment,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry.
Public speaker comments on this item, the minutes for August 17th.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We have none.
All right, now,
I'll move the
motion?
minutes.
All right, very good. A second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a team going on here today, so we have a motion from Commissioner DeLuccio, second from Commissioner Wiscom. Are there any discussions, thoughts? I see none, so let's go ahead and get a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Commissioner DeLuccio,
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscom,
Yes.
Commissioner Boss,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke,
Yes.
and Chair Bonderson.
I will abstain, I was absent that day.
Perfect. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And that takes us to item 2D, public comments pertaining to items that are not on today's agenda. And I will go to you, Mrs. Esparza.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on items not on today's agenda, please fill out a speaker slip in the back of the room and turn it into staff. I'll go ahead and turn to virtual public comment. If there's anyone joining on Zoom who would like to speak on general business, again, that's items not on today's agenda, please raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands, and I do not have any speaker slips. I'll just announce that we did receive written correspondence from Ernest Solomon, Sunita, Bert Swanson, and Robert Robinson Jr., which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Esparza. So now we'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is a concept review of a proposed project located at 320 West Carrillo Street. And I always like to ask at this time if any commissioners have any ex parte communications that they would like to share on this item. I see none, so we'll go ahead and introduce Ms. Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy is here from the city to provide the staff presentation. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. As you said, the item before you today is 320 West Carrillo Street. It's a concept review hearing for a 37-unit residential project. No action will be taken at this hearing. It is just to receive comments from you on the design. Here's the vicinity map showing the location of the project site. It's on West Carrillo Street, close to the highway, in between Bass Street and Castillo Street. Also to note that there's an alleyway that gains access to the site as well in the rear location right here. Here's an aerial view of the project site. So it consists of a commercial building along, excuse me, West Carrillo Street. There's also a triplex, a structure of merit residential building in the back, and some parking. And it's surrounded by residential uses to the east and to the north, and partly to the west. Also a service station directly to the west. You may recall that you had a concept review for the commuter lot proposal project. That's where these trees are located here, and that's the commuter lot just recently. So this is a required concept review hearing. It's required because it is a rental housing project proposed under the average unit size density, or AUD incentive program, and in the priority housing overlay area. It does not require any other discretionary approval by the Planning Commission, and it is on a lot that's greater than 15,000 square feet. And the purpose of the hearing today is for the Planning Commission to provide comments and recommendations to the Historic Landmarks Commission regarding the proposed design and consistency with the general plan. So the proposed project is using the AUD incentive program and also the state density bonus law provisions. Just a summary of the project. To start out, it would include relocating the existing residential building And currently a triplex, it would be converted back to a duplex, so there'll be 2 3-bedroom units as part of that relocated building. And then the construction of a new 4-story, 35-unit residential building with 4 studios, 19 one-bedroom units, and 12 two-bedroom units, and some low-income and moderate-income units as well, which we'll go over shortly. Here is a survey of the existing project site. So this is Carrillo Street on the right, the existing building to be removed in the front of the site. And right here is the existing residential building to be relocated to the front of the site. Here is the proposed site plan on the left. Shows the structure, merit, historic resource here on this corner, some open space area, and then the 4-story building with a courtyard in between. There'll be, it's one building, so you can go back and forth between these 2 areas, but there is an open space below. So here are the floor plans. So over on the right is the ground level, showing in the front a bike parking storage room, and then the units. Along the back are 3 parking spaces and a trash enclosure. And to the left here is the second level, showing the residential units. Third level to the right, additional units. This set back a little bit. There's a terrace here above the bike storage area. And then to the left, the 4th level, again, another roof deck terrace area right here, and then the units behind. Here are the elevations on the top, showing the proposed elevation looking from Carrillo Street. So it shows the structure of merit located here on the left, and the new building to the right and beyond. The proposed height is over 45 feet. It's 46 feet 10 and a half inches, so over the required height. Rather than asking for a height exemption request from you today, the applicant is using one of these, their incentives or concessions to request relief from the height requirement. Some additional elevations. The east side, so this would be looking from downtown area towards the building, and then down below, looking from the freeway section to the project site. The proposed landscape plan showing the courtyard and proposed plantings. There will be the removal of a few trees in the back of the site, but mostly lots of new plantings proposed. Design review is required by the HLC. The project did go to the commission, and the commission stated that they appreciated the design of the new building, and they did support the height of over 45 feet. They suggested restudying some of the elements of the project and some to reduce the visual impact of the overall mass of the project. Our architectural historian prepared a memo that was presented to the HLC, and the HLC concurred with the conclusion that the project meets the Secretary of the Interior standards, that the project will not have a negative impact on the historic building or the streetscape, and that it will restore historic integrity to the building by moving it to where it once was along West Carrillo Street. The existing residential building, which is in the back, had previously been located right up at the street, so it's being moved back to that original location. And regarding zoning ordinance consistency for parking, it is exempt from providing parking under Assembly Bill 2097, although the project does include 3 parking spaces in the rear. In regard to density, as I said, it's an AUD project and in the priority housing overlay area, so the maximum density is 63 dwelling units per acre, and that equals 25 units. The maximum average unit size is required to be 811, and the proposed for this project meets that by being 766 square feet. As I said, the project also is taking advantage of state density bonus law. So when we look at that, we determine what the base density is under that, and in this case it's 26 units. The project's providing 12% of those 26 units to be low-income units. That would be a 1 studio unit and 3 one-bedroom units. 12% is 4 of the 26. So because they are providing that number, 12%, they're entitled to a density bonus of 38.75%, and that equates to 11 additional units. So they have a total of 37 residential units proposed. They're also required to meet the inclusionary housing ordinance requirements by providing at least 10% of the units as moderate income units, and that would be 3 of the 26. You count just the original units, not the density bonus units. So 3 of the 26 would be moderate income. That would be 1 one-bedroom unit and 2 two-bedroom units. As part of the state density bonus law, the applicant is allowed to seek relief from development standards. In this case, as proposed currently, they would have no setback for the buildings. So that would be one of the concessions they're asking for. Also, the building height being just over 45 feet. And also not providing the 15% of the lot area as open yard. They are close at 12%, but do not meet the 15%. In regard to public improvements, the project as currently designed does meet the current requirements by dedicating 5 feet to increase the size of the sidewalk. So over here to the left shows this line. They would dedicate this area for sidewalk, and then this would be the new property line. The proposed project you can see is right at that property line, and so there would be 0 setback, which is why I stated just previously that they would asking for relief from that 5-foot variable setback. The pedestrian master plan, though, will be created, be put into the ordinance to have this as a requirement for projects where it isn't currently. So if this project were to meet the requirement of the pedestrian master plan, they would have to dedicate an additional 4 feet. So that's where this pink line at the top would be. To meet that PMP requirement, they would need to dedicate a little bit more property here for a sidewalk. In this case, if they were to ask for a waiver, transportation planning is not supportive of a waiver of this under state density bonus law because they've determined that this would be more of a public safety issue and aren't supportive of that. So in that case, this would have to be redesigned. However, this project also has been submitted as a SB 330 housing application, and what that does is lock in the development standards at the time of when they submit the application. So currently it is Chapter 2244 that is the requirement. If this project is complete within the 180 days required for the SB 330, and that turns out to be close to the end of December, if the project's deemed complete by that time, they could take advantage and just state that they would want to comply with this 2244. So hopefully that makes sense. I know the applicant would probably like to talk to you about this as well. A question came up about whether this historic resource located on the site could be demolished and what that would entail. So I wanted to go over that process a little bit. They are, of course, relocating it on site. But if a historic resource exists on the site, the project has to be evaluated to determine whether it would be affected by the project. So in case of being demolished, of course it would be, that would be an impact, because impacts include physically damaging, destroying, or altering all or part of the resource, and of course demolishing it would fall under that category. A categorical exemption shall not be used for a project which may cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of a historical resource. So in that case, if you were to demolish the project, it could not be an exemption. which leads to the preparation of an initial study to determine whether an MND, mitigated negative declaration, or environmental impact report would be required. And then what kind of mitigation measures would be applied to the project, if any could be, to mitigate the loss of this historic structure to a less than significant level. So that would be the process that we would go through if this structure of merit were to be proposed to be demolished in terms of CEQA. Another thing to consider is that the Historic Landmarks Commission would be looking at this, and according to their guidelines, they must make at least one of the following findings. So specific measures have been incorporated into the project scope to mitigate the loss of the historic resource to a less than significant level, and that would be determined through the CEQA process. Or that the historic resource has been damaged by earthquake or other means, and it's not practical to restore it. Or the preservation of the resource is not economically feasible to rehabilitate. And both of these need substantial evidence to prove that. Or finally, a compelling public interest justifies the demolition. So I just wanted to go over that in case there was a question about why they didn't choose to demolish the structure of merit to provide more housing on the site. This would be the process to go through if that were the case. But as shown on the plans, they are moving it to the front of the project site. So in terms of general plan consistency, we've looked through the general plan policies, and there are numerous policies related to housing. The land use element encourages rental housing and affordable housing. The housing element, of course, encourages new housing and affordable housing. The historic resources element protects historic resources and discourages demolition of historic resources. The environmental resources element and conservation elements, they promote energy efficiency and stormwater management and protect visual resources. And the circulation element encourages secure bicycle parking facilities. So I feel like these, all of these that I've pulled out of the policies from the general plan would apply to this project. So the processing steps and approvals for this type of project, it goes through the PRT, Pre-Application Review Team staff review, which it has. It goes to the Historic Landmarks Commission for concept review of the AUD project, which it has. Today, of course, we're here at concept review by the Planning Commission. And then they would resubmit plans, and staff would go through the completeness determination and conduct environmental review. When complete, state density bonus approval would be made by the Community Development Director, and then that would proceed to Historic Landmarks Commission for design review approvals. Our recommendation today is that the Planning Commission provide comments and recommendations to the Historic Landmarks Commission regarding the proposed design and consistency with the general plan. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Next, we will welcome up the applicant team. And as always, just introduce yourself. If you are passing the mic to the next person, I'll just ask that each person introduce themselves before presenting, and you will have 15 minutes to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson, members of the commission. I'm always glad to be here with a housing project. And I will be brief here. Hopefully this will all work. So here is a little rendering of the project. I'll share some more later. Kathy always does such a good job with her presentations that I don't need to really say much. The Bates House, constructed in 1904. Our client for this project, I mentioned to many of you at the site visit, is the same client that we built the Honor Bar in Montecito with, and also the recent project on De La Guerra, where Radius Group is located. And in that case, we had a historic building that needed to be preserved and renovated. And so Alberto Vollner is his name, and he's happy to be able to restore this building. And when we realized it had 3 units in it, the third unit was sort of gerrymandered in, or gerrymandered, depending on your point of view. And so we're getting rid of that and basically restoring it back to its original 3-bedroom configuration. So here's the plan, which Kathy has already showed you. We are a little short on the open yard area, and that, it's important, really is primarily because we can't provide the private outdoor open space associated with the open yard requirements because the balconies just become too big, frankly. The landscape plan, I'll be happy to answer questions about this, but the one thing, I don't think this works. Yeah, it does work. So we do have a large sycamore tree that we're planting here that kind of will create that transition between the historic building and the new buildings and also mitigate the mass. And then the trees along the perimeter are also an important part of keeping that, basically mitigating the mass of the 4 stories. And Courtney Jane Miller is our landscape architect. I should have mentioned John Kuykendall is here along with Hugh Rufain from my office, in case I forget something. The question of the setback, this is a little complicated, by the way, and I confess, I think we're only entitled to 2 concessions because we are 10%, 12%, and I think we have to be 15% very low to get 3 concessions. So, this may well be our need for a concession, and I would like the commission to discuss whether they would be open to granting the height exception that we're requesting as part of your purview so that we're not using an incentive for that requirement because we're just a little teensy-weensy bit over the 45 feet. But here's the way I understand things. The blue line that you see is the municipal code setback, and then the purple line is the pedestrian master plan setback. So what we're going to do is revise the plan here because we can to shrink the bike parking and push that back to be compliant with that line. So then the only problem that I have without completely altering the design are the steps into the historic resource. So if we can find a way to somehow allow those to encroach into that pedestrian master plan setback, that would be where I would hope we would land. But as I said, we can definitely shrink the parking. The problem I have with the historic resource is I can't really push that back more because you can see the green line is the roof above. It has a pretty large 4-foot overhang all the way around it. So I hope that kind of clarifies. Obviously, at this point, there are many buildings along Carrillo that are right at that red line, but nevertheless, it's important to have future projects comply. But if there's a way that the steps can somehow encroach, that will help us. Otherwise, I can tell you that frankly, what we would have to do is we'd probably have to remove or take a whole stack of 2-bedroom units and turn them into either 1-bedroom or studio units, is our other option on this. And I can explain that further if that doesn't make any sense. So I thought I'd just jump into the views. These are our photo sims, basically, that we've done of the existing that is on the left and the proposed on the right. This is across the street, kind of where El Carrillo is. This is looking from the intersection of Castillo and Carrillo back. This is what's on the cover sheet, kind of give a sense of the context there. And then along Castillo next to the station. And then finally from the alleyway looking back to the west at the proposed project. And then I have a little video. HLC asked us to demonstrate that story poles would not be necessary, so we've actually prepared this video in hopes, I see it's at the end there. There we go. To kind of give a good sense of the neighborhood and the context for the massing. You've heard me before complain about story poles being a fairly ridiculous expense, and I'm hoping that we don't have to do them on this, but ultimately that will be up to Historic Landmarks Commission, and you all may want to weigh in on that, but this just gives kind of a good moving view of the context of this building in the neighborhood. I'm sorry, I don't have music to accompany it. So you can see the historic Bates House forward, and, you know, I think that's one of the great things about this project is to bring that building back onto Carrillo where it was originally, because it was moved back in the 50s to the back of the lot. You can see it in relationship also to the Craviota property to the east. And then just we swing around here to look back at the El Carrillo project, which is predominantly, or it is all 2 stories at the street, but 3 stories in behind. And I think that is that. So let's go back. If I can find myself, you really may need your help. Let's see, here it is. Can't seem to get to the, back to the slideshow. She's gonna count this against me in terms of time, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Let's try and shrink this. Let's see if we can shrink that. There we go. Okay.
And before we proceed, Chair Bonderson, to the applicant, we're having some timer issues, so I'm keeping time on my phone right now, and you have 9 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I like it when there's timer issues. Kathy's already shown you these. The section through the building, this really illustrates the lower line is that 45-foot max line. You've also heard me before kind of make the case for adequate ceilings in these units. So this is what the ceiling condition is, and that's what we're trying to preserve in the case of these small units. I believe that ceiling height is very important, and I believe that ultimately this height difference of 1.5 feet or whatever you really are never going to perceive from a practical standpoint. Again, the elevations, I'll go through those quickly if you want to see them more again. This is kind of an interior view of the courtyard space, and then it's mirrored on the other side with the historic building. And this just gives you a kind of sense of the studios, the 4 studios. The 1 bedrooms are in the blue, and the sort of pink lavender, whatever color that is in on the ends. That's the count that you already saw, and just in a little more detail, this is the typical unit. And, you know, I will tell you that with accessibility laws the way they are now, it's pretty hard to get a unit much smaller than that studio of 519 square feet, but these are clearly workforce units. And then that's the 3-bedroom configuration of the relocated Victorian, and those are existing photos that I won't bother you with. So I think the other thing that I wanted to point out is, as far as the site is concerned and the parking, we did feel that Alberto Vollner, our client, has a number of apartment projects, and, you know, the move-in, move-out is really probably one of the most important aspects of apartments like this, and so that parking area is really essential for tenants to be able to move in and move out. It's not really meant to provide parking for tenants, but it obviously provides some little extra over and above what SB 2097 would allow, and I'll reserve whatever time I have and be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Barso, would you please just let the applicant know the time remaining, and we'll record it?
Of course, Chair Bonderson, the applicant has 6 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Perfect, so we'll keep that in the back of our minds in case it needs to be used. And next, we will go to public comment. Obviously, this is public comment meant for this project. Mrs. Barza, could you please direct us on either virtual or in-person meetings and how you want to handle it, since we have a bit of a tech issue today?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We'll start with in-person public comment, and if there is anyone in the audience who has not already filled out a speaker slip that would like to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and turn it into myself or Ms. DeBusk over in the corner. I do have 2 speaker slips already. First one is Claudia Bratton. Ms. Bratton, if you can come up to our podium,
Thank you very much.
and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. My apologies.
Oh, pull the mic down. Okay, good. I live on Bath by Anapamu, and I have owned that house for 30 years. And yes, I still have a mortgage. Anyway, It's really hard to park. I am blessed with the driveway, but my family, when they come to visit, and little kids, it's really hard. They drive around, 3 or 4 times. I'm very concerned that, they say that people will be taking the bus from that. I don't think so. I think they're going to have cars, and they're going to be parking on Bath and Castillo, and we're not going to be able to have, a normal thing. Also, right now, as you know, the police are not doing the parking matters. They're not giving tickets. Like 5 days in a row, a Giordano's truck was parked in front of my house. I did call Giordano's, but it's really, really difficult. And, when I have a guest, they go, well, we went around 4 times and then we're 2 blocks up. So I hope you can consider that it's important to have some parking. I know housing's very important too, but that's my request. And let me help with the next guest coming up.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Leslie Bruckner.
Okay, and I'll bring you right up here. Yes, there you go.
My name's Leslie Bruckner, and I also live on Bath Street, and I find that the creation of this proposed project will be really awful to the already awful parking situation in the whole neighborhood. And it's not just, as Claudia says, about visitors coming, but it's also people who live on Bath and don't even have parking. Some of these little houses are landlocked. There's no parking at all, and people go around and around. And the city has taken away parking because of automobile accidents happen frequently on the corner of Anapamu and Bath because there's not a speed bump or a stop sign. And it's a disaster. There's far too many residents and far too few parking spaces as it is. And I don't think that people will use public transportation, maybe in the future with Uber and self-driving cars, but not now. And the idea of if any developer thinks that a place with however many 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms and even studios, those people are going to have cars. And I believe and I hope that the Planning Commission mandates parking spaces for that building. And yes, I know that the state wants more housing available, but there's a difference in reality and dreams. And it's a dream that we don't need parking. The reality is we do. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. And it looks like I have one more in-person speaker slip, and that's for Martha Lange.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman Bonderson. Even more. Yeah, I think it's on. I just need to speak up. Thank you, Chairman Bonderson and Commissioners. I also live on Carrillo Street, just up underneath the freeway on the other side. And in addition to the parking issues, I'm curious about the bicycle access. I know that they are making plans for bicycle storage, but there are no real true bright bike lanes on Carrillo Street. It's very dangerous, being that there is a freeway entrance just a block later. And there are a lot of cars, especially at traffic rush hour, merging in that exact zone that the project is planned for. And if they are considering that many of the residents will be using bikes in that area, it's unclear to me where those bike lanes and where the bike access and ingress and exit will be for those residents to safely come and go. And I also share the concerns of the previous speakers with the parking issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my in-person public comments, so I'll turn to virtual. If there is anyone participating on Zoom who'd like to speak on the item, please raise your hand. I do have one raised hand for Steve Johnson. Mr. Johnson, we are sending you a mute request. Please unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I support the project. However, I would note that it exhibits a shortcoming of many state bonus density projects. The developers have all recognized that the most economically beneficial configuration for them is 15% or close to it, very low income units. And then there's an AUD requirement for 10%. But those two percentages only apply to the base density. For this project, base density is 26, I believe. And so you get 4 very low income and 7 deed restricted moderate income. And you get 0 market rate moderate income units. 0. You've gotten 0 market rate moderate income units for the last 8 years. In the last housing cycle, none were produced. There's a remedy to this problem, and it's called the builder's remedy. If the applicant was simply refile or file a slight change to the project requesting that the affordability requirements be based on a builder's remedy project, then you get not 7 affordable units, you get 37. All 37 units would be restricted to middle income residents. And really, middle income residents could include many combinations of moderate income residents. Housing is fungible. You could have 2 moderate income residents in one of the 2-bedroom units. They would meet that test. That's certainly got to be a better configuration from the city's point of view, and I suspect it might even be better from the applicant's point of view. Yes, all 37 units are restricted to middle income residents, but there's no restriction on the rent that can be charged. It's truly market rate, but restricted to middle income residents. And I'd very much like the Planning Commission to at least ask the applicant to consider that option. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I do not have any more raised hands, so then I'll just announce that we did receive written correspondence from Steve Johnson and Patrick Morgan, which was distributed to the commission prior to the meeting. With that, I'll turn it back to Chair Bonderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sparza, and thank you for all the public commenters. We will now turn to our question period. I'm going to invite my fellow commissioners to turn on their lights for comments, or excuse me, for questions. And we have Vice Chair Bauke. Please go ahead and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got a couple questions, and some of them have been touched on by the public commenters. As to, and this is to the applicant, as to the parking area in the back, is it just basically striping that we're getting in that situation? Because if you get a big vehicle parking in there, if you actually had physical barriers as to the boundaries of your parking area, that might be problematic. I wasn't quite sure from the drawings whether it was just striping that we're seeing in that configuration.
Well, Chair Bonderson, Commissioner Bauke, it is, let me see if I can go to that slide. This will show it. So we do have low landscaping around the perimeter, but yeah, there's nothing, the trash enclosure is there. We have been assuming that these are not large moving vans that would be moving in, that they're more, like what people move with rental trucks, but they would park in that handicapped parking, which is allowed to be used for loading and unloading.
Right, okay. My concern is basically, I'm looking at the green space that's at the very top of the drawing, which basically defines your property boundary and your area there that might actually sometimes become an impediment to basically larger vehicles and multiple vehicles being put in that area. And I'm not sure how much we really gain by doing that, but that's.
Yeah, certainly that is an option. HLC can waive that landscaping along there, I believe, along that parking area. So we might want to at least open it up and make it more maneuverable.
Okay, this is the question I had for you. Staff, could you walk us through, and this is sort of this whole discussion about the master plan for the street. what that cross-section looks like, or what would happen if, my big concern is how many buildings currently exist that wouldn't comply with the master plan if and when it's adopted? And could you explain, I wasn't quite sure exactly when it kicks in, you know, and in what exceptions there might be, and just sort of how all that works, because I think some of the commenters was there isn't a bike lane, which is definitely a concern in that area. It's like, will there be a bike lane in that master plan? And is that really what we're working towards with the adoption of these dedications?
Could I have my,
I'm working on it.
okay, find the right slide for this. 20.
Did it work?
So first of all, it's my understanding that this new ordinance will take effect sometime in the fall. I don't know when exactly, but, and I don't know whether there's a time lapse of when it's, if there's a 30-day time period or not. But I was just told that sometimes in the fall, this would take effect. I can't answer your questions about other projects, and I haven't really looked at how, what other projects in this area currently meet it. I know there's another project across the street that has the same situation where they will need to comply with this. I think on the corner of maybe Bath, not sure. It's not my project, but another
Okay.
planner's working on a project, so that would be across Carrillo on the other side. So I'm not sure what other questions you have.
Well, I was just trying to understand what the end game is as to what we're trying to accomplish on this very, very busy corridor street that we have. And, you know, if the improvement plan is to get bike lanes on there, which I presume that might be part of this, I would think if that's something that we believe is something important for the city long-term, that we should hold the line on that, you know. And unfortunately, in this case, it means Brian might have to make some modifications to the project to do so. And that's what I'm trying to understand is, and you know, there's a lot of times that the cities plan very, very significant changes to a street's cross-section over a long period of time, and it may take 20 years to get the dedications and such. I'm not sure where we're at on this one. I know we had the Chippy Lube project not too long ago, and I wasn't sure how they complied with that.
That's the one I was,
Okay,
talking
so
about, so.
you understand, I think, the question, which is, what's our long-term plan? How many properties are non-compliant? We're clearly in a case of a lot of these properties are going to be redeveloped because they're some of the lower hanging fruit in the priority housing overlay. So I'm just trying to understand, is this something that we should basically be holding the line on or not?
Commissioner Bauke, while I don't have a complete answer to your question, I did just get feedback from our transportation staff that a bicycle lane is not proposed in this location. So that's not part of the.
Okay, so that's not part of the plan.
Correct.
Okay. Sure.
Chair Bonderson, Vice Chair Bauke, if I may respond, I think your question was long-term, but I think you also had in part, what are we looking for, and like, how does that impact with this project? And as Ms. Kennedy and Mr. Cannell alluded to, this project is submitted under state density bonus law, and so the applicants allowed to ask for incentives, concessions, and waivers. At this time, it's conceptual, so we have not, it's the Community Development Director's determination of whether we accept waivers, concessions. We're required to accept, I think, if Mr. Cannell's correct, 2 in this case. And so the only way, there's certain requirements and findings we have to make when we deny a waiver or a concession. So that's something as staff that it sounds like transportation is looking at with regards to this particular setback, if that's a concession that the applicant would like to make. The other argument that the applicant is making, and these are all theoretical, because we're still in concept, is that they've submitted a preliminary application under SB 330, which locks in the development and ordinance requirements at the date that they submit that complete preliminary application. It sounds like their 180 days will expire if, in December. So to lock that in, they need to have a completed application submitted to the city by that time. And if they do that, then they're locked in with those development plans unless we can adopt our ordinance that establishes the pedestrian master plans prior to, or during that time. And then they would be subject to the PMPs going forward. So those are the two interplays that are going on, and it's kind of, it's hard to say, and so I think they're just wanting your feedback, which you please give on.
Thank you for that.
And with Vice Chair Balke's permission, I'm going to just add in a follow-up question, because you guys got so close to where I wanted to be, and I know by the time my question period comes up, we'll be long past. I wanted to know, based on what Ms. Kennedy, you mentioned, that this transportation ordinance is likely to go into effect in the fall, but we don't know when, and we don't know if it will potentially make it in the fall. Is there a specific date in which the applicant has to submit to avoid it? And I'm not talking about the December date. I'm talking about if this goes into effect, let's say in November, I'm just hypothetically stating. The ordinance goes into effect in November, they don't get their application in until the following week or the following month in December. Are they then forced to rearrange their entire project, even though they've done this many steps? Because I remember you put up a checklist and they're on like step 3 or step 4. They would have to go back and revisit the design. Is there any way that we, either here or internally, can help them lock in today's decision or understand a date in which they can therefore miss the additional requirements that may be applicable at a later time?
I think it will depend on what the ordinance says. I don't know. Usually they refer to, when projects are deemed complete and such. So it would depend on how that is written. It's really hard to know.
It's a game, you're trying to beat the deadline, but how do we support an applicant?
Chair Bonderson, it would really be up to the applicant to get their application deemed complete within the timeline that is specified under SB 330. That's what would lock them in. There's nothing that the Planning Commission
Or
could do to necessarily change that, but at least they do have that mechanism.
Okay, and just lastly, is there a way, once they do submit, if they're in the process of getting deemed complete, let's say they're partially through that process, the ordinance goes into effect, is there a mechanism in place where they could then ask the community development director or someone else to give them some consideration on the inside?
Chair Bonderson, I haven't seen the ordinance, so I don't know how it's written or will be written, and as Ms. Kennedy says, sometimes it includes different dates as to what projects are applicable, whether it was deemed complete prior to building permit, so there's different timelines that could be applied, depends on how the ordinance is worded. So yeah,
Yeah, we
does that
don't
answer
know
your
until we
question?
see it. It's a very tricky situation, and the timeline is really cruel. So thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate you letting me step in.
No problem. They'd help clarify things. I have 2 more questions for staff. When I was out there on the site visit, first thing I thought of, well, why is this project being proposed in Spanish colonial? And then after the fact, I want to confirm that it is in El Viejo Viejo, so therefore it shall be, okay? Because something, there's a juxtaposition on architecture here that just doesn't feel quite right, but that's okay, if that's what our standards are. And Ms. Kinney, I think I understood, and thank you for putting together the historic preservation policy and procedures. It's basically the applicant in this case has chosen to move the building so he lowers his entitlement risk issues with the CEQA process. Would that be a reasonable assumption? I'm getting head nods, so I'd say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's the extent of my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. first question is for staff. There were comments about the parking issue in the neighborhood, and 40 years ago, there were parking problems in that neighborhood because it was mentioned, some of the homes don't even have a place to park on their property. They were built before it was common for everyone to have a car. Excuse me. According to state law, we don't have a say on that. Is that correct? Is that what directs this?
Commissioner Lodge, that is correct, yes,
Okay,
SB
so
2097.
We can't do anything about that, which I'm sure will not be happy news to those, but that's the way it is. Well, I'll save the rest for comment. My other questions were asked by Commissioner Balke. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. I hope that clarifies our limitations as a commission for the public. Next, we have Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question for the applicant, just about the layout. I understood when we were on site on Tuesday, the rooftop terraces would only be accessible to the units that are directly next to them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And another question while you're still up here. You mentioned that we're not sure what will happen with the pedestrian master plan, but you mentioned potentially shrinking the bike parking area.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned in my presentation. So we intend to go ahead and reduce that bike parking, move it so that that new building is out clear of the pedestrian master plan limit. So my only problem then are those stairs into the historic duplex. And I'm hoping that with transportation staff, maybe we can work out something to allow those to encroach, because ultimately I don't think that the pedestrian master plan is anticipating any street widening. There's no required encroachment for street widening. It's really just to create a more gracious setback in the streets that have the wider right-of-ways. So I hope that will be a reasonable compromise to be able to satisfy and keep the unit mix the way we've got it.
Thank you. And so you'd still have the 40 bike parking?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we
perfect.
just have, right now, we made it a little more gracious, kind of thinking about doing a little repair table or whatever in there, but we'll be able to comply with the requirements for the bike parking and meet that setback.
Great, thank you. I have just one, this may be partially for the applicant, but partially for staff. I understood in the staff report that the applicant is required to provide notice to all tenants 60 days prior to filing the formal planning application. I'm curious about the tenants now, and I understood that there were additional protections for individuals who are being possibly displaced aside from 60 days' notice.
You mean compensation?
Yes.
Yes, so that's part of the ordinance
Okay,
as well.
it just wasn't in the
Yeah.
staff, or maybe I missed it in the staff report.
I didn't go into much
Okay.
detail about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's true.
That concludes my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boss. Next, we have Commissioner Lucho, please.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of questions. This is pretty straightforward, but maybe I have a question for the applicant. You mentioned something about, under the state, you're going to get two incentives, and you're not sure about a third one, and you may request us to, approve for you the additional height.
That's correct.
Can you explain that some more to me?
Well,
please?
I'm not certain, the state bonus density thing still has me a bit confused, I confess, but there are concessions, there's waivers. I've heard that we can have as many waivers as we want, and what is a concession and what is a waiver? I admit, I'm not a legal mind in that regard, but just in case, I think it makes sense for the commission to grant if that's possible, and maybe it wasn't noticed accordingly, so I guess it isn't possible, and, maybe we can deal with it later, but to preserve one of those concessions by having the commission comment that they would be willing to grant the height waiver, maybe is the way we can at least get there today, should we need it.
Why would you need it again?
In the event I only have two, and I need one for open space, and I need the other as a waiver for this problem.
Okay.
Like those steps, it would be the
You mentioned
reason.
before you may be able to work that out with staff to steps, and not need the waiver?
To allow the steps to encroach would then be potentially be a waiver.
Okay.
So that's why I'm hedging my bets.
As far as
Chair?
getting,
Oh, Chair Bonderson, I was wondering if I could jump in at this point just to clarify a little bit about this. So this project, because they are, have a certain amount of affordable housing, they get 2 incentives concessions. So like I stated in the staff report, those would be the open yard and the setback relief. But they also are entitled to waivers and reductions of other development standards. So that's what we're looking at, and there's essentially no limit to those. So we could look at the height being part of that. And that's why we took that out of your purview today. We had initially written a report to provide you with all the height exception findings and things, but that could be a development standard waiver. And so I wouldn't worry about that. First of all, it wasn't noticed to do the height exception for today, so we could not ask you to review that anyway, but I don't think it's necessary. It could be just a waiver as part of their project.
okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And then the additional, if you go forward with the steps within that, and if there's some way to allow that too, that would be able to be done through this same process.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, excuse the delay. Next, we have Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you. I have a question for staff. So understanding that we're hopefully going to see more projects like this where we are prioritizing housing and there may not be as much parking with them, are we really evaluating that as a city? What can we do to help make this area more bikeable now that this project is going in? I don't know that there is anything we can do. I'm just wondering because obviously I hear the concerns on the parking, but there's a balance, so.
That's a great question. I think that's definitely something that we need to look into citywide since we're reducing the parking. For me, it would be more of a public works transportation planning question about what is in the works for bicycle planning and such. And unfortunately, we don't have transportation staff here, but that's absolutely needed, yes.
So is there an option that, when these projects come forward, that we can come to transportation staff and say, is this an opportunity for us to prioritize a bike lane here, given that we're building an entire housing project on the idea that they're all going to bike?
Commissioner Wardlow, transportation planning is constantly evaluating those sorts of things. They know that AUD projects in the downtown don't require any vehicle parking and that they do require 1 bicycle parking space. So that is definitely something that they're taking a look at. They updated the bicycle master plan map, I believe, in March of 2022. So that's the last time the map was formally updated. But it is something that they're constantly looking at.
Okay, excellent.
If I can just follow up on that, Commissioner. It's interesting because one of the first things I ask our client on this is, are you sure you want to build this without parking? And his attitude is that, the bottom line, these units will rent for less because they do not have parking spaces. And in his mind, he thinks that people will deal with that reality of not having cars. And we have a number of people in the De La Guerra project who do not have cars. And the housing authority projects across the street are examples where there are actually if you look in their parking structures, which were pre-AUD, there are very few cars that are in there. So the good news is I think the units will actually rent for less because of this.
I appreciate
And I
that.
also wanted to mention that the alley also does at least mitigate this issue of bike access, because residents will be able to ride their bikes and then come through the courtyard and park in the little bike parking. And the bike parking, we put it there just because it kind of created a sense of a commercial storefront, along Carrillo.
I'll ask you a few more questions while you're up here before I go to staff. So where the bikes are all going to be stored, is that unit in the front where you can see in and you're going to be able to see all the bikes?
Exactly. So it's a little bike store.
Okay, cool. And then, so I appreciate your remarks on, how you can work with the city staff on trying to address the setback issue. I guess my next question is for city staff, sorry. from what Brian's proposed kind of in the hearing today, are you guys comfortable with that from the perspective if, you know, a year down the line, the city is going to be able to maybe implement a bike lane or something? Is the setback difference going to impact that?
No, that wouldn't impact
Okay.
the new bike lane, right?
All right. And then my last question is maybe for staff, maybe for Brian, but from the HLC's remarks about the windows, saying that we should kind of revisit that, or was that specific to the windows for the big, to look into the bike area, or was that specific to the windows of like the actual design of the building?
It was the bike. They just want me to refine that storefront for the bike parking.
Okay. All right. I think that's the remainder of my questions. Oh, wait, no, one more question, sorry. Is staff comfortable with what Brian has proposed in the hearing in terms of the kind of concession on his ability to address the setback?
Well, definitely happy with the bike parking move back to meet the setback. Well, actually, it would still be a 0 setback. I'm trying to think, if you move it back to meet the master plan, it would still be within, what's the 5-foot variable setback? Just to make that clear, but it would be, I think we would be supportive of that. I'm not sure about the steps, even if that's allowed. So it's hard to determine whether, if it's allowed, then I think it would be supportable, but I'm not sure that it would be.
So outside of the
So,
steps, the actual,
Sure.
like, besides
Yeah,
the steps,
steps.
we're good with the setback based on what he just proposed?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
So next, it's my turn, and I will start with a follow-up from Ms. Wardlow's, Commissioner Wardlow's last question. Ms. Kennedy, just out of curiosity, is there any reason that you don't know what the encroachment requirements would be in this particular example that's on the screen for the stairs? Is it just something we've never seen before, or that it hadn't come up prior to today's meeting?
Well, the reason for this area to be dedicated more is for sidewalk purposes, so.
So widening the sidewalk, is that what the goal
Widening the
is?
sidewalk, and then there's a frontage zone as well, which is, I think, the 2 feet 6 inches, which could be on the property line, or be on the private property, but it's to increase the sidewalk width, so that
So,
would
yeah, it's-
defeat the purpose of what,
Having
having this-
stairs right in the middle of a sidewalk? Yeah. Well, this is actually a perfect introduction to the series of questions I have having to do with the setback situation. So kind of leading back to the previous planning commissioner's comments with regard to the pedestrian master plan and kind of understanding what this block and future blocks, excuse me, not future, continuing blocks above and below this site. If we don't have some sort of a mapping system that shows which projects are already in the encroachment and which ones already are providing enough space for this future pedestrian master plan goal, it's really hard for us to know whether or not to give an exception or give a concession or talk about this, because if we want to be supportive, we need to understand how this affects what the overall city looks like in this area. It's really hard for us to hypothesize, you know, if we are really strict and support this pedestrian master plan, but it's the only property in the entire vicinity that has the amount of space dedicated to this future sidewalk. And then what does that look like? Does it mean that only in front of this property it's wide enough, but then it goes narrow again? And is that fair to the applicant? So I'm having a little bit of a hard time trying to figure out if this is the project to start applying the pedestrian master plan to.
Chair Bonderson?
Yeah.
If I could take that one.
That would be great, thank you.
So whether to grant a concession, a waiver, or an
Yeah.
incentive is an internal staff process that we look at that that won't come to the commission. So you
Oh,
don't even really
we don't
need to
have-
consider it, and you don't even really need to consider the setbacks on this project, because that's something that internally we have to take care of. So I'm not saying it's a red herring, because it's important to understand it with this project and understand the dynamics of it, but also keeping in mind that when we plan for the future, that's what we're doing. That's what master plans are
picture.
for, big picture. Not all, some buildings will encroach into what will be the new setback, but when redevelopment comes, then that's how we get buildings to come into compliance, and eventually, hopefully, we'll be meeting the master plan, so.
That's a perfect explanation, and I guess the reason I was bringing this up, and I apologize, I wasn't trying to be particularly hard on you, Ms. Kennedy, by aiming this question at you, but just to understand if these are the concessions being thought about by the applicant, they're thinking about it for their application, not for our action here today, is that correct? Because we cannot take action on that particular topic?
Chair Bonderson, that's correct.
Okay, perfect, I'm glad we clarified that. So,
Can I just add one more item
Absolutely.
about this? So the PMP has been applied throughout the city. This wouldn't be one of the first ones that you've decided on. It is applied on many, many projects.
yeah,
already.
actually, I
It has-
thought
yeah,
so,
many.
because I have the pleasure of liaisoning with the Transportation and Circulation Committee, so I always get to hear this stuff, and I was just really curious how many projects, new projects, have used this in this particular area, a few block radius of Carrillo at this location. But perhaps if this project is coming, back to the design boards and to different commissions, that information could be provided by staff in the future for the next visits to a review board, if that's possible. I'd like to suggest it. And then also, it would be really nice for us to know, maybe not us, but the next time this project is reviewed, what would be happening in that pedestrian master plan setback? If it's not a bike path, what else? Is it just the sidewalk? Is that the only thing that's on the checklist, I assume? So just to be really clear. And then, okay, that actually concludes my entire question piece on that topic. And I'll go really quickly to Mr. Cornell. The question has come up, I believe Commissioner Boss asked about the two decks that are going to be private decks for two of the units. And I was curious to know if either one of them, or perhaps I would focus on the larger one that's on the third floor, if it has been, or if it could be considered to extend the corridor, the exterior corridor, and make that into a public outdoor space where tenants could access and use it to sit in a little bit more of a private location instead of on the ground floor, maybe barbecue up there, and unfortunately remove it as a private balcony. Have you thought anything about that at all?
Yep, I have, and my problem is that if you see the plan on the left, which is the fourth floor, that's the deck that you're talking about,
Correct.
correct?
You're right.
So if I extended that corridor to that deck, then that basically becomes a dead-end corridor, and I would have to provide another stair somehow from that deck, and I just don't know where I would put that. So,
You answered your,
Yeah,
I don't know
I
if you
mean,
heard
it's-
everyone up here basically finished your sentence.
yeah.
So
and
we
I
heard
think,
it before you finished.
ultimately, we did talk to our client about this, and I think his concern, and I think this is really legitimate, as soon as that became a public outdoor deck, then the poor resident underneath is just, it becomes a problem
Yeah, it becomes
for
a
them,
public
for sure.
access point.
Could I get back to this whole question of the front yard? Let me switch back real quick to the landscape plan, because I think I just want to make sure we're all clear that we, again, with the change of the design to move that back to the pedestrian master plan setback of 15 feet, you can see we are, unlike really anywhere else on Carrillo now, we will have the parkway and we will have the 6-foot sidewalk, and everything will be clear of that. the pedestrian master plan allows for the first 2.5 feet of that 15-foot setback, or I should say the furthest back portion of the 15-foot setback. You can encroach 2.5 feet. That's considered the, what's it called? The
Frontage.
frontage zone. Thank you. So that's why I'm thinking that those stairs, those steps, if they're in that, kind of within that frontage zone, that we're going to be okay. But we are giving the sidewalk that the pedestrian master plan anticipates.
I'm glad to hear that. And hopefully you are granted the ability to keep the stairs there. I'm sort of trying to think
Yeah.
ahead to support this for you.
Yeah, I hope so. And, if I go back to that plan, whoops.
You had it.
No, I was going the right way. There, this one. So the only way, I don't want to do this, but if you look at the wing that's on the left side of each one of these stories, I could theoretically, like I said,
Shrink 'em.
reduce a unit by making it a one-bedroom instead of a two-bedroom for the 4 floors, so I'd lose 4 two-bedroom units and exchange them for one bedroom if I really do have to move that Victorian back. So there is a solution to it, but obviously would prefer not to, just to keep the unit count the way we've got it.
Thank you. I appreciate that you talked us through that a little bit further. And my last question is back to you, Mr. Cornell. We heard our public speaker, Mr. Johnson, talk about this builder's remedy type work. Is that something that you're familiar with? You may have
Well,
thought
I've
about already?
I've actually kind of tried to stay away from doing any builder's remedy projects. As I understand it, I would either have to provide 20% of the units as low income or 100% as moderate. And so I think that's what the speaker was talking about, is having the 100% moderate. But no, we haven't, prior to this coming up, I never really never discussed the concept with the client.
I'm just going to kind of put this out here into the universe, but if maybe you would consider having that conversation and see if it might be of something of interest for your team. And I'll just
Happy
leave
to.
it at that.
Okay.
I think it's just an interesting topic. Okay, I do have Commissioner Lodge. Do you have a follow-up question at this time?
Yes, a couple of
Perfect.
questions have come up. In your presentation, Ms. Kennedy, I think you said there are no windows on the courtyard ends of the units. Is that correct, or maybe
I
I
didn't
should?
say that.
Yeah, there are windows. I can show you. I can switch.
You can even see it on right above the kitchen sink.
Yeah, so this is the one courtyard, oops, you switched, okay. So that's the courtyard elevation looking east, and then that's the courtyard. So you can see there are the front doors to the units, which are glass,
Oh,
and then
okay.
also windows facing into that courtyard.
Okay. Because I was, if that was true, I would have suggested that there be glass in the doors so that some light comes in from the other end. And then my other, where did my other question go? Well, I guess these are, okay, I guess these are actually comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lodge. And we're going to move on to the deliberation and comment period next. Before we begin, I wanted to check with Ms. Kennedy. Do you have that slide that kind of reminds us what you would like from us here today? I can just have you read it quickly and we'll get started. I have Commissioner Wiscombe to start first, as soon as you have the slide up. So we're just providing comments and recommendations to HLC regarding the proposed design and consistency with the general plan. Thank you for the reminder.
correct.
All right, Commissioner Wiscombe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate a lot of the thoughtful questions from my fellow commissioners. I'm not going to go in any particular order. I am excited that the Bates House is going to be relocated to its original location. I think that's really outstanding. I support the height increase. It's moderate. I like the elimination of the vehicular access on Carrillo. I think that's going to greatly improve that street. It's so busy as it is that getting rid of those driveways will be great. I appreciate the smaller unit size. I think this is a time when we're developing workforce housing and we need to have smaller unit size. It just makes it more affordable. I am okay with the setback relief for the stairs for the Bates House, but and part of the reason for that is that Ms. DeBus said, or Ms. Kennedy said that there's no plans for a bicycle lane on Carrillo in that area. So, and I appreciate moving back the bike structure. I like the fact that it's creating a storefront, kind of a bicycle shop storefront. I think that's great, but I think moving that back would be great. I am okay with the open yard relief, and I said okay with the height increase. I think the project is consistent with the general plan and the elements of the general plan that Ms. Kennedy outlined. I appreciate the large sycamore that separates the house from the building. I think that's a really nice feature that's going to really make the Bates House stand out. And HLC wanted to see a video, and thank you for showing that. I think that was extremely helpful, and I know they're going to be glad to see that. I personally, as a planning commissioner, although we're not making the decision, don't think story poles are necessary. I think that video tells the story. In terms of the parking, Mr. Cornell, you mentioned that the client wants move in and move out. And Commissioner Bauke was talking about perhaps eliminating some landscaping for ease of mobility. Although I don't like eliminating landscaping, I think that's a really good point and something that maybe should be studied. So that, because that looks like a very tight area back there. So, let's see what else. I think that's pretty much all of my comments. I think this project is very exciting, and as we said on site, we'd like to come out, some of us like to come out and see that house being moved. But it's a very exciting project, and I think you've done a really nice job with it to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I pretty much agree with Commissioner Wiscombe's comments. I'd like to make a couple of extra ones that are related to the no parking. This is the fourth project we've had come before us. It has, that I recall. There was, I think it was 425 Santa Barbara, 425 Garden, 360 Chapala, and now this one. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it works. I'd like to see one of them built. In connection with 360 Chapala and with connection with Mr. Canal's project about the rents being lower because there is no parking. At the site visit, I asked the developer for 360 Chapala, will the rents be lower because there is no parking? And he simply said, rents will be what the market will bear. So, and I suspect that will be the case here too. Oh, and one other thing, Mr. Canal, you're going to be shocked by this one.
Hold
I
on
once
your seat.
commented to you about a tower which doesn't come under the height limits, not having the courage of its convictions. This one's a little bit like that. And I was wondering about making it taller so that it could be seen from, you know, just from, say, from the street level, and would break up the, this is a design that break up the solidity without long, solid roof line.
Mr. Cornell, you don't have to be shocked. We're all shocked for you. What a lovely
For those
comment.
of you that don't know me, Mr. Cornell and I have battled long and hard over height issues. And so otherwise, it certainly fits within the general plan and our desire for more housing. It just is something that we, without the parking, we have yet to see, does it really work? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Next, we have Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, just an appreciation to staff for all of the detailed general plan element by element specifics. I think that really helps us see consistency with the general plan and not in just one element. So that was very helpful for me. Glad to see more affordable housing. Always wish there were more. And as the public commenters noted, a better result would have been realized from a builder's remedy project. So I know that I think, at least myself as a commissioner, but I think my fellow commissioners are looking forward to city policies to incentivize more affordable housing development, to have a higher standard than just the state requirements and bare minimums. A couple of comments about parking, because at least for myself, when I lived downtown, I didn't use a vehicle. I was able to bike, it was the downtown shuttle at the time, and the bus system. But I also wonder, because there's another project half a block away that will, I think as proposed at 400 West Carrillo, they'll have additional parking spaces. So I wonder if the timing would work out to have an agreement between both of those projects to offer some of the parking spaces potentially to the residents at 320 West Carrillo. And I want to make the distinction that the Housing Authority projects can confirm that residents do not have vehicles, where this project cannot confirm that. So just wanted to make that distinction. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Boss. Next, Commissioner Lucho, please.
I don't know where to start, but I actually have all positive things to say about the project. But I'm going to say building remedy, the only reason that's possible is because the city is out of compliance with the housing element, and I don't think that's something I would want in the city. It's going to further erode at the local ordinance that we have, our control over zoning. So I definitely want to go on record and not encourage that. And I did advocate in an earlier meeting that obviously, yes, we can do more to encourage more housing, and I won't go into detail now. I know that we only require 10% density, but I mean, what did you say? Inclusionary housing, we could actually, some cities have 20, 30%. What's interesting about this project is actually with the 37 units and 7 are affordable units, it actually comes almost to 20%, actually. I did the arithmetic. I took the 7 into the 20, and it's 18.9%, so that's 20%. So that is really cool. So I'm really pleased about that. Can you just go to the next slide about the general, it shows what the general plan, how it conforms to the general plan? That general plan consistency, so obviously we can make all those findings. And I really like the Queen Anne building being pushed out to the street where it was before 1949, I think, and how next to it is, the building is right next to it, and the storage for the bicycles are on a first floor level. And if you look at the design, the second story, third and fourth is pushed back. So I like that. So it's pushed away from the street. And also, it's only 3 stories, I believe, out of respect to the Queen Anne building. Is that correct? So, and I like that too. So I think it is well designed, and I actually in this case can support, if we had to, and asking us to, the little additional height on this project. Let me see if I have anything else. And also, as far as the visual aids, I know you came with the video today, and I think that's what the HLC asked you to do, short of saying that you needed story poles at this time to bring something else forward, and I really think that's a good solution. I have a bunch of scribbles, but I think I'll just stop there, because I think I'm obviously supportive of the project since the general plan and as well as the design. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lodge, would you like to continue?
Thank you.
Come on back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What has occurred to me is that if people do ride their bicycles, they need a place to park them at their destination. And is any consideration, this is for staff, is there any consideration being given to providing parking spaces in the parking garages? Or if there, or I would like to suggest that that be something that be considered. The other comment I just wanted to make is that this project, by combining estate bonus density and the AUD, is at a density of 93 dwelling units per acre. That is huge. Yeah, I figured it was 19% affordable, Commissioner DeLuccio, but in any event, it is 93 dwelling units per acre, which leaves, at 19 or 20%, that leaves 80% that's market rate. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Commissioner Wardlow, please.
Thank you. So I'm very excited to see this rental project. I do find it consistent with the general plan and the housing element and our broader goals on housing as a community. I appreciate the applicant's decision to exceed the minimum requirements and provide some affordable housing or addressing these goals. I am supportive of the height exemption to be granted under the purview of the Planning Commission. I'm comfortable with the front setback as described by Mr. Cornell in today's hearing. I do have concerns about the bikeability of this area and the parking issues that it will cause to the residents that exist today. But I do see this as something that we as a city need to really prioritize as we move forward with encouraging housing developments that may result in a less high price tag in exchange for not having as much parking. So I think this is something that we as a city need to really think about and adopt into our kind of planning, which I'm sure we already are, and I'm probably preaching to the choir. But some comments onto the design. I do find the design compatible. I would say the more foliage, the better. If there is the opportunity, and I'm not sure if I saw it in the slides, that, you know, next to the steps that will exceed a little bit, if there could be, you know, foliage around that, that would be great. I do enjoy the bike store kind of frontage and the vibe that that gives out. I would hope that the applicant does, you know, have the necessary security for that, understanding that it's going to be kind of front and center for folks to see a bunch of pretty bikes. But overall, I'm very supportive of this project, and I appreciate the presentation today.
And next, we have Vice Chair Balke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For brevity's sake, I'm going to basically summarize my comments as I agree with Commissioner Wiscombe and Commissioner Lodge's comments, one on the tower, comments as to the parking area in the back, some flexibility as to that. Definitely believe this project is consistent with the general plan. Do note that we have very limited authority on the parking area, so discussion. So I'd just say we unfortunately don't have any flexibility on that to those who have commented on that issue. I would like to thank the applicant for saving the historic building. I've done this before, and that is quite a task to undertake. So. Go get them and hope it all works out, because sometimes they don't quite work out. And as to the height, I have no issue whatsoever with the height, and I think as we have these smaller units, you know, this additional 3 or 4 feet that these projects might have for higher floor plates is important for the livability of these units, and I think those folks that are living in affordable units should have as livable of accommodations as possible. So I'd like to make that notation. And I think that's pretty much it. The visual presentation in lieu of story poles, I think the technology now exists in the world of architecture to model things accurately and in sort of almost real time. And I believe we might want to revisit the discussion about story poles being a requirement, because they are very, very, very expensive and doesn't really gain you a whole lot. So one other, and this is more of sort of a commentary, as we see if this project and other projects that are affordable housing, we've got our average unit density program, there's a state density bonus program, we have builder's remedy, there's a whole lot of different programs and I think it might be worthy of some time for the staff to come before us and lay out all the options that are out there, because at some point in time, we need to sort of coalesce maybe something that maybe work better for our city that might be beyond state housing density bonus provisions, because right now we're getting, so I'll call it a chicken soup approach of sort of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and and it's confusing even to us. And I really would wonder what the public thinks, because it's really beyond it, and some of the acronyms even get complicated. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Vice Chair. And I just want to piggyback, since Vice Chair Bauke just introduced a really interesting suggestion, and I know Mr. Busk, you're taking notes. In the event that we could have some form of training provided for all the different options of housing, I would even recommend going one step further, since it may be here at a Planning Commission hearing, to record it and make it into a tutorial for any future applicants who might need access to that information, that they can find it on our website as a tutorial for learning all of the options and how we as a city work with those. And it could just be a link or a button to a section of the video. Before I go on, I know Vice Chair Bauke, you just turned on your light. You may have a follow-up.
I missed one, which is on the
Sure.
issue as to the pedestrian master plan. From my viewpoint, to the extent feasible, we should try to reach compliance to the extent feasible on that issue and the stairs and how that works, if we're talking within a sidewalk zone or in a landscape frontage variable situation. That probably might be good enough, but I think a holistic view of that for the whole corridor would be appropriate to undertake. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm last, so I'll go through my checklist here, and I just want to start by saying I was so excited and truly pleased to see a housing project come before us that uses the state density bonus plan law in combination with the ADU incentive program. We don't see a lot of those, so it's really nice when we do. I also want to say I absolutely loved your renderings. I loved the video. It makes it so easy for anyone to just feel like they can really understand what you're proposing, and I wish more projects would come before us with that type of graphic presentation. It really captures the essence of what you're bringing forward in a way that helps most viewers to understand it. And with regard to the kind of the request to weigh in on the topic of story polls, I would suggest whenever possible that the HLC makes this requirement, makes this type of presentation into a requirement to avoid story polls in the future. And of course, that may be just dependent on the type of project and what they're trying to see. But in a case like this, it's an excellent use of the digital options that we have available. Next, I can easily make all of the findings in the general plan. And I can support the open yard reduction, the height increase. I think it's a very comfortable request based on what you're providing in exchange. I'm glad to see that the design of the courtyard, the way that you've proposed it, makes it feel very comfortable, at least in the renderings and the elevations on paper. It looks really like a pleasant place to live. I also enjoyed the idea of bringing the Bates House back to the front facade again and allowing the public to experience it where it should be and it should have stayed in the first place. I also truly appreciate the fact that the driveways have been removed from Carrillo. That was a really good decision, design decision. I hope that the stairs can stay in the encroachment, that you have that type of support, and it will be an easy path forward to maintain the larger units. I think that's what we really need to see in our community, and I hope that that's something that can be provided to you as part of this experience, but we won't know until we see what's coming next. I continue to be an advocate of parking. I may stand with a very small portion of the community on this, but I believe that parking is always really important to provide a type of inclusivity in renting and owning homes in downtown, because some people just can't even consider living in a area of town if parking is not provided. And so I know that that's not a requirement, but I continue to remain sensitive and concerned to the impact of the already strained parking situation in the immediate neighborhood. And I wish that there were ways for us to do better based on what we're allowed to do to increase housing. So perhaps some other way of helping the neighborhood would be to continue to provide regular reminders and awareness on areas that people can park if they do need that parking, and perhaps have guests. They don't have to go circulating, but maybe they have a reserved parking spot in a nearby parking lot or whatnot. It's a conversation that doesn't belong here, but I continue to always think about that. I also would like to request from staff that any future projects that have any type of transportation or master plan, pedestrian master plan component, to please invite a transportation planner who may have been able to help support our understanding on this topic today in a wider sense. And just to wrap it up, I guess I have to say that there's a first time for everything, and it was really, really lovely to hear Commissioner Lodge's recommendation. I do like that. I didn't think of it myself, but I completely agree with it. If you have this invitation to enlarge the tower, I think that we can recommend to the Planning Commission, I think we as a Planning Commission can make the recommendation to HLC to consider that as part of the design. And for the first time, as long as I've been here at least, Mr. Cornell still has time that he hasn't used, and that's also pretty exciting. Who knows, he might use it before we're done here today. But I'll just wrap up my comments with that. And I do see we have one more request, so Commissioner Wiscombe, please go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My only comment is I support Commissioner Lodge's very surprising request. I think it makes sense. I've kind of looked at it, and I kept looking at it and thinking it just doesn't have the pizzazz it needs. And so please add that to my comments that I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you chimed in on that too. I think you have overwhelming support from us here today on that design element, which I know is going to excite you very much to play with. Anyhow, I believe that's all you need from us. Ms. Kennedy, are you all set?
Yes, we do need a motion.
Yes, I know. I just wanted to make sure we covered everything. Okay, so do you want your 6 minutes? You want a few seconds of your 6 minutes?
Okay,
You could
first of all,
talk about
No.
anything you want.
thank you, Sheila, Mayor Lodge, Commissioner Lodge. It is a pretty anemic, puny little tower, so we'll do our best to improve it. Thank you. I'll waive my 6 minutes.
Oh, goodness. All right, well, thank you for you needed to say something. You couldn't just leave it. Okay, well, this has been a very pleasant hearing so far. I will now ask for a motion. That is the longest yes? Do we need a motion for this?
Ms. DeBusk, I don't think we need a motion for this. It's comments only, correct? No action item?
It's majority comments, so in the past, we have had a motion to kind of pull it all together, essentially saying that it's consistent with the general plan and the design is acceptable.
Can we just can I make a motion to move our comments on to the Historic Landmarks Commission?
That's a good idea.
Does that cover it, Ms. DeBusk?
Commissioner Wiscombe, I think so, because
I think most of
everyone
us-
was supportive of it and made comments.
Most of us said about the same thing, so.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's my motion. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Was it you? Oh, I couldn't tell who it was. Okay. I'm so glad that was easy. So we are going to take the motion from Commissioner Wiscombe. We're going to take the second from Commissioner Wardlow and open up for discussion. Are there any thoughts or questions or comments? I see none. So Ms. Esparza, please do a roll call vote for us.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe,
Yes.
Commissioner Boss,
Yes.
Commissioner DeLuccio,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke,
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for the applicant team and to staff for the presentations. And we can now move on to our administrative agenda. We have committee and liaison reports, and I'll start with staff hearing officer reports. Commissioner Boss, do you have anything to present today?
No report today.
Thank you. I will open it up to the overall commission. Are there any reports for today? Please, go ahead, Commissioner DeLuccio.
Report, HLC from the 9:30 meeting, 9:30, 8:30. It's not
August
9:30
30th?
yet.
Okay.
another hotel development, 17 to 21 West Montecito Street. That's behind the Amtrak. It was built as a Harvey Davidson shop in 1925. It's currently a motorcycle shop there. The current building is not eligible for historical designation, and it's not considered a historical resource. They're proposing to construct a 27,000 square feet, three-story hotel with roof deck, consisting of 44 guest rooms and 44 garage parking with valet parking. So the project was before the HLC for concept review, and it's going to return to them for final design approval. In the meantime, it's going to be coming to the Planning Commission. It needs a coastal development permit, and it needs a development plan. Suggestions were given by the HLC for design refinements, and they requested a visual aid, here we go again, perhaps a three-dimensional model prior to deciding if story poles are required. The other item, it wasn't on the agenda, but it sure as heck had a long half-hour discussion. It was State Street. State Street is part of one of their committee reports they give, and the HLCs are concerned about becoming more engaged earlier in the process. So far, they feel like they have not been included in a meaningful way since it is located in the EPV and Landmark District, and it's going to have to come before HLC for design approval. So the chair is going to write a note to the City Council.
All right, well, thank you for sharing that. It's all very valuable information. Any other reports for today? I will just make an announcement that the State Street Advisory Committee met twice, once at the end of August and once again yesterday. And so if anyone's interested in keeping up with that, the videos are online on the city's website. And that now concludes our September 7th Planning Commission hearing. Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for next Thursday, that's September 14th. And thank you all for being here with us today. That concludes our hearing at 2:50 p.m.